All right, well, thank you guys for coming today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy week to come here or join us by Zoom. I greatly appreciate the time and investment you have in working with our 2025 QAP. So we are recording this session. It will be on our website probably early next week. So if you want to go back and listen to it, as entertaining as it may be, it will be there for you to have. And for those who didn't get to make the meeting today, it'll be there for them as well. So all right, so today's agenda, we're going to have, of course, the morning session. We'll go over some agency updates. We'll do some underwriting reminders, and we'll start talking about the QAP and some tax exempt bond ranking. We'll break from lunch from about 11:30 to 11:45 around that time. And then after lunch, we'll meet back again and we'll, pick back up with our QAP. Before we get started, I just want to let you know we have some tables outside if you need to take a phone call. There's shade on this side, or you can stand in the scorching sun here. There may be a little bit of shade out front and to the side over here. The restrooms are right here in the back corner. And I want to introduce our agency staff. We have some new faces at our agency, but I want to introduce everyone here that is from the agency. So we have our Executive Director, Richard Hutto. Sarah Shinsky, his executive assistant. We have two commissioners here today, Commissioner Fleshman and Commissioner Mackey. We have Ed Knight, one of our consultants. We have Marnie Holloway, our Deputy Director of Programs. We have Leanne Watson, our General Counsel. We have Chris McMillan, our Development Finance Director. Zach Tronco is a new face, but many of you probably have spoken to him or received an email from him. He is our multifamily underwriting manager. We have Kelly Kays, Matt Brown, and Amy Russell. They are underwriters. We got Damian Carpenter, who is our asset management manager. And then you may have met Robin Smallwood. She has been speaking with most of you about your construction inspections and your applications. And then we have Kathy Hardy, who helped you check in this morning. And then we have Amy Harmon, who we could not have this event without. She does a great job every year, and I'd like to thank her for the time and effort she puts in to make this run smoothly. And then we have Mitch Nance from our IT department. We have Mark Shelburne from Novogradac. And I believe Michelle Murph is here from Department of Mental Health. Many of you have maybe spoken to her regarding the supportive housing, and she's our contact for the referral source. So that's did I miss anybody? I think I got everybody. All right. So some things I just want to remind the group about today is the Secure File Exchange. One of those is our Secure File Exchange. So as you know, our email attachment size is very limited, and we ask that you upload everything through the Secure File Exchange. We had seen an issue with construction inspections being sent in and being caught and being held, and we're not getting those. So we ask that you upload those through the Secure File Exchange. Any type of document, if you are a 2020 application, and we took paper applications then, you don't have to submit another paper application for placed in service. You can just upload everything through the Secure File Exchange. So we do have that available. We are notified of that as soon as it's sent in. And then, of course, you get an email reminder that it was sent in as well. And then for construction inspections, this is the second year we've done this. We have inspection week each month. So typically the inspection requests are due the last of the month, and then we do the inspections the next month, the first week of the next month. That calendar is posted on our website, so make sure you use that. We also have forms, a new form. We have Form 5, which was our construction inspection form that we've used for quite some time. We've changed that to where it's only for our 25, 50, and 75% inspections. And we created a Form 6, which is for our 100% inspections. Now, on the Form 6, there are several things, I think there are 11 that you'll need to submit in to get 100% inspection. And then once we have all those items in, we'll be able to request that inspection. So those are things that you'll need to make sure we have them in. That 100% inspection needs to be completed and all items cleared before you submit your place in service application. So we're seeing some applications come in, place in service applications come in, and we're having to work through getting the 100% inspection completed and cleared first. So just a reminder that will hold your place in service application up. All right, so in case you didn't know, we received our 2024 9% applications 2 weeks ago. That list of applications we received is on the website. We received 47, 37 were new construction and 10 rehabs. We're going to go over our QAP timeline for 2025. So it's kicking off today, and we hope to have a draft posted on July 11th. We would ask that you provide any written comments by July 2nd so we can get those gathered, reviewed those at the agency, and have those ready to go when we start working on that draft. Then shortly after the draft is posted, we're going to host a Zoom to go over any changes that we have in the QAP. And then there'll be several steps back and forth. We'll make some changes. We'll have a public hearing, but we hope to have it to our board for their approval at their October meeting. So please, when you submit comments, please don't wait till we have the public hearing comment at the end to submit your comments. It's kind of a late time for us to make changes to the QAP. So please comment now. That would be helpful to us, be helpful to the agency. You're welcome to comment every time, but if you'd like to see the change, it'd be beneficial for both you and the housing authority if we did that up front and got those comments coming in early. All right, so this is the projected timeline for our 9% program for applications. We want to see applications. We hope to have applications February 3rd through the 7th. We would post the scores by the end of the month. And then to take full applications May 19th through 23rd, and hope to do final scores and awards mid-July, beginning of August. Now, this all, keep in mind, is tentative. It depends on when we get the signed QAP back from the governor's office, when we get everything approved. But this is what we're going to try to shoot for next year. And then we are going to have another tax exempt bond application round this year. This is tentative dates. We will have something final up on the website, hopefully by the end of the month. But tentatively, we're going to take applications October 21st through October 25th. Have the final ranking posted by the end of the year, end of December. And then those deals would go before our board in January, and then before SFAA at their March meeting. So please make sure that we plan those accordingly. Next, we have some underwriting reminders, and I'm going to turn this over to Chris McMillan.
Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Chris McMillan. It is on. This is just some general underwriting reminders of stuff we're seeing, and this is just to help us speed the process along by and large. So, we need to be making sure that our square footages all match between Exhibit G, Form Q, and the rent roll place and service cost certification, the J2. The rent roll is less important, but the more that it all ties together, it speeds things along. On Form J2 in the CPA cost cert, please do not include the residential heated square foot of the building. It's just another step, and we'll slow down the process, and you guys would have to be going back to your CPAs to get that fixed. Also, please ensure that the application is submitted in both Excel and in PDF formats. And please confirm that all the required signatures are completed, including the tax attorney on the tax exempt bond applications. And we flip, yeah, placed in service. Please follow the template letter that we provide with the Exhibit J1 that's to be completed by the CPA. And please be aware that the underwriting criteria is applicable at initial application and placed in service. So that may result in the reduction of reward.
So we did send out an e-blast yesterday afternoon going over or just giving some topics that we feel that we want to hear some comments back on. So today's meeting is not limited to these topics, but maybe a starting point. Any topic is welcome. We have microphones throughout the room. And if you would, when you get up to make a comment, if you would just introduce yourselves so everybody gets to know each person, and start with your comment. So some things the agency is interested in is some additional point criteria, regrouping the set-asides, maybe a public housing authority set-aside, the tax exempt bond ranking or scoring process, rehab tiebreaker, cash flow per unit and expense ranges. Again, any topic is welcome, but these are some of the items we'd like to hear from you guys on. And before we get started, just a reminder, how does this change benefit affordable housing? Does your suggestion have the support from your fellow developers? So if someone gives a good suggestion or a good idea, echo that comment that you support them. You could add to the comment. Be specific and provide examples. Be realistic and recognize the limitations of the agency or the program. We get good suggestions every year, but sometimes we're not able to make those suggestions right away. There's research that we have to do and we have to implement. So just be realistic that you may have a very good suggestion, and we take all suggestions very seriously and we look into those, but it may take us some time. And be patient. Some changes do take time. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. I'm here to hear about your suggestions for the 2025 QAP and how we can make that an even better document than we had for 2024. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Anyone want to go first? All right, so the 2024 is perfect, and we'll just move right along. All right, here we go. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm Cindy Herrera with Columbia Housing, and I wanted to address the public housing component. Public housing is one of the deeply subsidized affordable housing resources we have throughout the state. And we would very much welcome a public housing set aside. At a minimum, public housing has to qualify under preservation. The preservation definition was basically multifamily HUD with PBRA expiring contracts or existing tax credit deals. Public housing needs to be preserved. I think at the federal level, there is a tremendous push to convert public housing out of the public housing platform and into the Section 8 platform. And in doing that, it requires renovation and bringing all of those units up to date. And so I think at a minimum, obviously a public housing set aside would be great, but we need to at least recognize that, redeveloping public housing is preserving a very scarce and deeply subsidized housing resource. Public housing authorities reach the lowest income people in our state that the tax credit program does not reach. And so we need to be able to have the tools to redevelop and preserve the public housing throughout the state.
Kim, can I just want to amplify and support Cindy's comments. Whether or not it's a set aside, I think that especially I like Cindy's comments about preservation. And not only do we have public housing stock across the state that needs to be preserved, but in addition, we have HUD assisted housing that in our community in Greenville, I'm like, where is the outrage over the condition of this housing where taxpayers are paying the rent? And I would urge the agency to prioritize preservation of not only public housing, but HUD assisted PBRA units, whether that's through a set aside, some kind of point preference. I mean, I'll leave that up to you, but we have a lot of needs in this space across the state, and our policy document should support that.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I also agree with Cindy's comments, but maybe for a little different reason. I think that the Public Housing Authority does need a set aside because for a for-profit developer to try and create new housing that is definitely needed. I mean, we've got a huge shortage, but they're correct. They also need to preserve those units. And they have access to funds, federal funds that we can't get access to. So I think it makes sense to have a separate set aside for them. And things, balance out better that way. I think it's really kind of comparing apples and oranges to have them lumped in the same group, especially in the bond program.
Thank you. So you would feel that the public housing need would have a set aside in maybe both programs, the 9% and the tax exempt bond, or?
I was focused more on the bond program. I haven't thought as much
Okay.
about the 9% program, but definitely in the 4% program.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts about that?
As a public housing authority, I do support that, but I also need to understand that a lot of the housing authorities have their nonprofits. So it could actually be beneficial to put in a nonprofit pool and let all the people make the requirement that everyone in the LLC ownership has to be a nonprofit. So that, there's no game playing that goes on with that. One thing you probably need to be careful of is that with the housing authorities, if they're going to get their projects need to be within their jurisdictions. You don't necessarily want a housing authority going out of their jurisdiction. Totally agree with the PBRA properties. And another thing, just to comment on the last year's program, that on the rehabs, they had any deal from 1997 to 2010, previous tax credit deal, got those 10 points. But it didn't operate that. Some states actually penalize people for coming in, 15 to 20 years. If you come in too early, then you actually get negative points, and also potentially have the opportunity for rehabs that hadn't ever been in the tax credit program. So if you could, I think if increasing the rehab set aside and housing authority, either individually or with a nonprofit set aside, would be good.
So on that with the rehab that you were talking about, so would you think that would be tiebreaker? Like if you've never been in, never received tax credits before, never rehabbed before, would that be like a tiebreaker, or would you want to see that as a point criteria?
Well, I think it should be a point criteria. But hopefully
Okay.
you don't get everybody running around with the same scores that you got to go to the tiebreaker.
Okay. All right.
But
And would you think that would be both for the 9% and the 4% program or the bond program?
I'm thinking for the 9% program. Now, some of the bigger RAD deals will probably go into the 4% deal, but there's smaller, especially the PBRA deals that benefit from the 9%.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's a good idea.
Kim, if I may, as a
Any
dial-in,
other comments on that topic? We're free to move to a different topic or any topic that you'd like to. Go ahead. Oh, no, anybody?
Hey, good morning,
Got some
Kim.
hands raised online.
All right. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kels Carroll with Sugar Creek Capital. Just wanted to raise the issue of the race to the bottom language under the tax exempt bond program. I think it's C24.
Okay,
We've seen it in other states where states have implemented that language, and it's really been detrimental to the program. I think it takes on many different forms. I think the most famous example is a developer building a gym in another southeastern state because it was the lowest cost per square foot. And so I would like to see that language come out if at all possible.
thank you. Appreciate that.
Kim, can you hear
To
us
echo
online?
what Kel said, I agree that the scoring criteria needs to change, especially in the bond program. One recommendation, because we've seen some really high costs in the bond program. I think one recommendation, and it's a tool that's been used in the past by SC Housing as well as North Carolina, but look at average cost across the applicants that come in and you lose points whether you're higher or lower than that average based on standard deviation. That way, that kind of keeps everybody in the same lane as far as cost. But if you base it on the credits instead of just the construction cost or total development cost, it gives you some flexibility across, your construction cost, land, and other things where you might be able to help mitigate some issues and still stay in that lane. I think that that criteria alone is huge.
Before you go any further, so you said North Carolina and what other state?
South Carolina's done it before.
We have done it before. Okay, I'll go back and check our QAPs for that.
Now, I don't know, I don't remember in South Carolina if it was based on cost. I don't think we've done it based on credits, but if you do it based on credits, it, like I said, it covers a wider range.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, but North Carolina has it in their current QAP?
I don't know if it's in the current one. but
Okay,
it's-
I'll
they-
ask.
Several states have done it.
Okay.
Okay.
Any comments on that, Parker?
I would like to echo Kel's and Kevin's comments that the race to the bottom isn't good policy at the moment. I would actually caution against the race to the middle. I think a scoring criteria that's more similar to the 9% is better. Something like the on the map jobs points wouldn't work well on the 4% side just because you need more land, more units. You can't get as close to city centers. But the issue with race to the middle is certain markets just have naturally different costs, like developing in Beaufort County and other areas of the low country are going to have substantially higher costs than areas that it's going to make it tougher for those areas to compete when it's a race to the middle. And those areas have just as high a need for affordable housing and bond deals.
Thank you.
And there was one follow-up point I forgot to make on that same topic. I know that, one pushback that criteria might get is, oh, well, cost in Charleston on the peninsula are more than other places. That is true, but it based on, using that median on the credits, if you get, I know that Charleston's willing to put in money. A lot of municipalities are willing to put in money because they recognize the dire need for affordable housing. Those funds should offset the additional or the higher cost in those areas. That would give them a vehicle to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Robinson Villa with NHE. I'll agree with Kevin. The credit per unit calculation, we thought it was always successful in North Carolina. It's not currently there right now, but we keep telling them to put it back, so maybe they will. And I agree with them that, in the high cost areas, those usually have soft funds that are able to kind of offset that, increase in construction costs. So if you're talking about just credits, it should kind of even out. And I think I just wanted to give you guys a comment. I appreciate the updated guidance on the state tax credit. I know it probably wasn't easy to make that guidance so close to the application deadline, but I think a lot of us appreciate we made the tough decision to put that guidance out. And then, I think we're generally in favor of kind of more point scoring criteria. We always say that, if there's kind of a prescriptive path of, different point scores that you can get, it doesn't always have to be one flavor. It just brings more projects in that can be successful. If you're not necessarily close to driving distances, but you have a good job score and things like that. But, I think if you guys can think up of some point criteria, I'm sure we can give you some opinions on whether they work or not.
Thank you. So talking about additional points, so what are you guys, I know you guys are in multiple states. What are you seeing that other states are giving for points that we're not, that you think work well? Or that you'd like to see us add, maybe another state doesn't do it, but you think it might work well in our state? What?
Brian Brown, I forgot to introduce myself before with the Greenville Housing Fund. I'd love to see points in the QAP for permanent supportive housing. I think it should be a policy priority. We have homeless crises in several of our urban areas and frankly, in small towns across the state of South Carolina. And the best solution for homelessness is a PSH, and other states use points to encourage the development of permanent supportive housing.
Thank you. Anyone else on that topic?
Hey, this is Patty
Gonna be a
Adams with
quick day
Rainbow
today, isn't
Housing.
it? All right, so, let me just see, how about regrouping the set-asides? We talked about the Public Housing Authority set aside. What about the county grouping that we currently have? Or the percentages that we use for those set-asides? Any comments on those? Would you feel that our state has maybe 3 different types of counties? You're more urban, you're middle, and you're more rural? Or do you think we're good with just the two set-asides?
I'll throw my hat in the ring for a metro set aside or like an urban set aside with, 4 or 5 of the largest municipalities in the state or something like that. I live in Charleston, and there's not a meeting I don't go to the city of Charleston where they ask me why we can't get more 9% deals. So I think,
Okay,
something
thank
to
you.
throw out there.
Anyone else?
Brian, again, I'd certainly support that. Obviously coming from Greenville, we're desperate for as many deals per year as we can get. I'd also say whether it was the other thing you could do on going back to the PSH comment is create a set aside for that, frankly. That would work very well. In addition, I'd also encourage you to think about how can you layer in some state trust fund dollars for certain priorities, because we all know we're sitting on a fairly large balance in that program, and we'd like to get those dollars in communities to meet the needs that we have.
Thank you.
The SCDOT set aside, that was a one-time thing, right?
Correct.
Okay. The innovation set aside, or, I mean, I don't know if that's ever even been done, but it seems very subjective and seems like something could come out of the, I mean, I get the concept, but it seems like it would just come out of nowhere, and we work very hard on these developments to try and put together based on the point criteria. And that just seems like one that could ambush you. So I wouldn't be in favor of keeping that one.
Okay. Okay, we do have some chats. We'll go ahead and let Zach go through those.
Thank you. We have one chat from Jen. She says that supportive housing is difficult in set aside B in the rural areas, and that she currently has a site where the utility allowance is more than the rent for the unit. She would like to see these points applied to A counties.
Okay. Is that the only chat we have so far?
And Patty Adams also. But her comment is wants enhanced resident services specifically utilizing core certified owners, managers, and providers has tremendously moved the needle upward in the advancement for the residents in affordable housing.
Got one more, and then we'll go to you, Parker.
John says that in relation to a set aside for public housing authorities converting through RAD who wish to utilize the tax exempt bonds, it is suggested that South Carolina Housing Agency take into consideration when determining scoring criteria and threshold criteria, the specific RAD rights that are protecting existing residents along with HUD requirements in relation to RAD programs.
Thank you. Go ahead, Parker.
As far as 2 set-asides versus adding a 3rd set-aside, I think both could be successful. The one thing I would add is the current Group B, the rural counties. I think it would be worth consideration to limit those to 1 award per year instead of 2. The rural tends to have a lot of more distinct higher scoring areas, and it caused a lot of us, clearly based on the pre-applications, to go to Sumter County. There was a couple other counties in there that everyone rushed to it, caused bidding wars. And it really just centralizes a lot of the application locations. Whereas if there was one award per Group B county, it would incentivize spreading it out as well.
Any comments on that, or what was the comments we had about the chat about the supportive housing? Any new topics?
We're kind of bouncing around between 4% and 9%, so it's a little difficult.
You want us to, we can just do 9% and then do bonds later? If that is better for anybody, we can do that. It doesn't matter.
Well, let me hit on bonds for a second.
Okay.
And, on the bonds, I think we want to be, nobody's got an interest really, or may, in using the exact same criteria as the 9% program, because we'll wind up in the same spots. But I think you can use some of the same criteria. I mean, if you sit down and think of it on a holistic approach, I mean, the things that we need to be doing is targeting developments where they're needed, and which would be some kind of, look at demand. And then another thing would be to look at services. We don't want to put them, way out, but they are larger sites. I think somebody else made that comment earlier. The larger sites are hard to find, really close to services. So if you do a distance to services, we'd certainly need to spread those distances out some.
Okay. I didn't think of that, but that is good suggestion.
Yeah. And I'm going to break my own rule. Bouncing over to 9%. I think one thing that we need to do is look at reducing the basis boost. Instead of doing the whole state as 30%, I mean, we need to utilize the state credits. And I think that if we reduce that basis boost to 20% or something like that, I mean, there's a lot of different things that you can look at. But unless, now, of course, if it's a designated QCT or DDA, it's 30% basis boost, which would handle, the Peninsula, Charleston, places where the costs are really high. But I think, dropping that basis boost will help us spread those credits out some. And the other thing I think we need to do is and it may not be very popular among some of my competitors, but I think that going to 100 units on the 9% program we're really using up a lot of those 9% credits in spots that we could probably get bond deals done. But so I think going back to 72 unit cap on the 9% is a good idea.
That's a good idea. We did talk about that at the agency too, about reducing the number of units for the 9% program. So thank you for bringing that up.
I just wanted to agree with everything Kevin just said. Maybe not as low as 72 units, but a slight decrease in the number of units could go a long way to spreading out the credits.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of general comments about the bond program. I think the bond program needs to have an appeal process like the 9% program does. It just would be fair if we had that available to us. I think that would be very important. So I wanted to make sure that was something that we considered.
We're actually looking to move that into the QAP where it'll apply to all three programs, the 9%, the tax exempt bond, and the state tax credits.
Okay, that would be excellent. There was one other thing and I just forgot what it was. I'll come back.
Okay.
Again, Randy Clack with AMCS. Just want to second what Cindy said. I agree about putting an appeal process in the bonds. And then also wanted to agree with what Robinson said about splitting up the set asides a little more. I think we'd really like to see some type of specific rule set aside. If you're designated rural by the USDA map, then that's a set aside on its own. And maybe a specific metro set aside of a certain population level guarantees those folks in that set aside. And it gives the middle counties kind of a more of a fighting chance.
Thank you. So again, we're talking about the set asides. Would you do that in both the 9% and the tax exempt bond program, or are we just referring to one?
I'm just referring to 9%. So I think the bonds are
Okay.
kind of good where they're at.
Okay.
I would suggest the set aside in the bonds as well, particularly if there was to be a housing authority set aside, because a lot of our transactions are better 4% transactions than they are 9%. And then the other comment I wanted to make was the 1 mile radius issue. I believe that's been removed in the 25 QAP.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We had some real issues where we're serving a totally different population and in no way would compete with a standard 4% transaction. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Travis Paul from the M. Peters Group in Greenville. I just want to follow Cindy and Randy, and I think an appeal process or a period to cure on the bond piece is key for us. I also think with the ranking or the scoring, whatever it looks like, if there was a way we could have a calculator or something to help us. I know it won't tell us how our peers have submitted, but what's going into the calculation. So I know like in our preliminary scores that came out, I don't know if like state historic credits or state textile credits were considered part of the state resources, but then it was in the columns on the final ranking. And I don't know if anyone that actually got awards had those credits, but I think it's important to know as we're structuring deals, like would a state historic credit be part of the state resources? And so I think calculating out those state resources by whatever metric is good for us as we're building our deals.
Sure. And we'll probably have a application workshop before we take the tax exempt bond applications in October. It'll probably be about 2 months before that, so probably around August or so. And we'll go into more detail with that so that everyone will be prepared for their applications.
Hey, this is Field Goodlet. One suggestion I would have for the 9% program is the leveraging point revitalization points. It's really difficult when you're looking for pieces of property to know which ones are going to get, a full 5, a full 10 points for revitalization. We put together these extremely long narratives and it takes several days of work to put the narratives together. And it always just kind of seems like a crapshoot as to, whether we're going to get 10 points, 9 points, or 8 points. So some more guidance, maybe simplifying that process, that would be nice.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion. Any other comments? So, we have briefly talked about or gone over some tax exempt bond ranking. I hear you don't want it to be like distance to amenities like we have for our 9%, and you want it to be different than our 9% scoring. So what are some suggestions that you would you recommend for that program? For, maybe a new construction scoring criteria for the tax exempt bond program? Those who are competing in other states for bond cap, what are some of the scoring criteria they use that you think works very well? Okay. All right. Well, maybe we'll come back to that. Maybe we'll have some suggestions. We can talk about that, think about that. So we really didn't get into rehab tiebreakers. I know we mentioned maybe some different points scoring criteria for rehabs, but what about a tiebreaker for rehab? What do you think? Right now we're using the lottery. So any suggestions on some topics or some criteria that would be good for rehabs for the tiebreaker? It's going to be a very, very short day. We might not even make it to lunch. All right. Okay. Maybe we'll think on that topic as well. Okay. What about cash flow per unit? All right. Expense ranges. I know we're seeing rising insurance costs, and that's throwing everybody out of the expense range, and we currently have the insurance removed, but what are
this is Robinson with NHE again. As a property management firm, I think the expense range is probably okay right now, especially since you've taken insurance kind of out of the calculation. It definitely helps because insurance is the wild card. So I think
I mean, I'll let people agree or disagree, but we're probably pretty good with where they are right now.
Okay.
But I'll kind of jump on a couple things I heard. So that reduced unit count, I think we would kind of be in support of that. And I think the revitalization section, it's kind of, where you differentiate yourself sometimes if you can hustle and kind of find it. But I do think that, it is a little murky sometimes. And it's kind of difficult to know whether you're going to get those points or not. So, just maybe a little bit more guidance, but those points I think are still a good way to differentiate yourself.
Thank you. Any thoughts on any of that or any new topics?
Yeah, just a couple of follow-up things. On the revitalization, just to give an example, I mean, there's a lot of stuff been done in Greenville, Spartanburg, and in Columbia. I mean, we have that development in the Bull Street district, and I can't think of anywhere else in the Midlands area that's done as much for revitalization as the Bull Street district. And we got 8 out of 10 points on that. So that's just one example of, and it was volumes. And I think it was almost 700 pages we submitted for that development. So that's what I'm saying. It just seems like a big burden on the agency to have to review that. And then we don't know how it's graded once it's submitted. It just seems really difficult for both sides. And on the supportive housing, I think, lower the 10% total units targeting 20% AMI to 5% of the total units targeting 20% AMI. There's a lot of developments out there now that have taken that challenge on, and they're still coming through the pipe. And there's a lot of state agencies out there that could help with that, but they're like, we don't have enough money to help that much. We can help you with 5%, but we can't reach 10%. So I think when you start setting those percentages, you really need to reach out to those state agencies that are able to help with that or funding sources. And just to clarify one thing, in my comments, I wasn't saying that we shouldn't use distance to amenities in the bond program. That is a good criteria, but you just need to stretch those out. If you're going to use it in the bond program, it would need to be stretched out because it's going to be harder to find those bigger sites in that, with hitting all those points.
To just increase the mileage, the distance.
Yes.
Okay. So you think that would be a good scoring criteria for the bonds as long as we increase the distance? Okay. I misunderstood that. Thank you for clarifying that.
And similar to that, what I've seen in other states, Georgia as an example, is they cap the number of total points you can get in amenities. So say you're within proximity to grocery, pharmacy, but maybe you're not in proximity to a school, you might still be able to get the max points just depending on what the exact formula is, because on the 9%, they cap you at 20. On the 4%, I think they cap you at 12. I've seen some states do that just because to get the larger sites, sometimes you have to be a bit further out from a lot of concentrated amenities.
Okay. Any amenities you think we should remove or any amenities you think we should add that we currently have distance to right now?
Field Goodlet. I think that the retail and pharmacy being grouped together, I believe in the 2023 QAP at the beginning, they were separated out. I think they should stay separated out, maybe go back to how we had it originally in the 2023, because a pharmacy and, like a Walgreens might have some retail stuff in it, but, a true retail store is going to sell completely different items than a pharmacy. So I think those should be separated again. A couple of clarifications that I think need to happen in the QAP, the affordable housing shortage points of, you get 3 points if there hadn't been an award in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years. That needs to be clarified, and we need to say, what years count. So since there was no awards or funding cycle in 2023, I think some developers were getting confused as to, did 2023 count as, one of those years for no awards? And then the other thing is the leveraging funds. The interest rate language is quite confusing. I mean, I know that we sat down and tried to figure out exactly what it meant. But if we could clarify that by saying, the in between 2% and the applicable federal rate, that would be much more simpler.
Thank you for those comments. I appreciate that.
I would want to caution the amenities in the bond program for preservation projects. Again, if there's a public housing set aside, public housing sites are located where they're located and they don't always have the amenities. So I would just want to caution that when we're doing preservation projects, those projects are located where they were built and we want to retain them and keep the deep subsidies where we can. And you just can't control the amenities that are always in those areas. So I would just caution that on what we do with amenity scoring.
So similar to the 9% where we have two different criterias or point scoring for the two different.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
that might be a good way to approach that.
Thank you.
To echo on Cindy's point, if that's one reason for the Public Housing Authority to have their own set aside, because then they would not be, that criteria wouldn't stand as equal against a new development, that's being done otherwise.
Gotcha. So they're competing against themselves versus a new construction deal. All right, any other topics, comments, questions? Go ahead, Brian, and we'll get you tracked in a second.
Yeah, I would agree that clarifying the leveraging language would be helpful. The 2 to 4, 5% would be great. I'm going to go back to your cash flow per unit. I would recommend increasing it. I just think these deals are so thin and, it's great when they're new, but 8 years down the road, not so much. And we're seeing deals, start to get into trouble that are aging. And I think you should build in some additional cash flow. I think going back to the set aside and sort of the idea of supportive housing, I do appreciate the points for deep affordability targeting, but that's different than the type of PSH and supportive housing I'm talking about. And maybe when, I was sitting here thinking about it, maybe putting that in an innovation category to really encourage collaboration with mental health, local service providers, housing authorities, because the reality is you cannot operate permanent supportive housing without rental assistance. You just can't. And so, when I think about this, I'm talking about really getting the capital resources to make it reality, but getting the operating support necessary to sustain it over time. And it really would benefit from some kind of focus in the QAP. And so I just encourage you to think about that.
Thank you.
Travis, again, I think some things as we're thinking about the tax exempt bond ranking, and I don't have a good silver bullet, but one thing is if you're in counties where maybe it's not as popular or contentious county councils or things like that, I think there should be some sort of scoring or addition if you have an economic development agreement that's unapproved, because if you go through that, then typically you have the support of the county behind you in a wide way. And I think we've all seen where deals start to break ground and people are confused and surprised that it's happening. I think also with the recent Inflation Reduction Act and having solar where it doesn't reduce LIHTC basis, I think we should be following that and incentivizing people to put solar on LIHTC deals. I think it just helps in general. So I know those aren't good tactical way or transactional things that we could do, but I think they're both things that kind of help the mission of affordable housing. One, you have county support behind it. You don't have this blowback afterwards. And two, I think putting renewable energy on these sites is key.
Thank you.
Hi, Trace Bagwell with Schaumburg Development. Just speaking a little bit for Drew and Holly that couldn't make it here. I know Holly has emphasized that, what Kevin's comments were about smaller deals make sense for Group B type properties in the metro area, having the bigger deals in place. And she also wanted to make sure that, she agrees with Brian as it relates to not limiting cash flow, that some of our older deals are in real struggle due to limited cash flows currently.
Okay, thank you. We have any chats? All right.
Hey, Randy again. I think I heard you mention this earlier, but if not, I just wanted to echo of some type of pre-application process for the bond round of similar to the 9% of, I think there were 95 pre-apps submitted and only 40 full apps. And so, people saw they weren't going to be competitive, were able to pull their apps out. Something similar to the bond round to give us an idea of where we would stack. Otherwise, we're spending, tons of money on an application that doesn't make a lot of sense, and it discourages people to, apply later.
I want to follow up on the previous comment, and on the 9% unit count. I agree that some differentiation would be really key. I'm okay with you, reducing it in certain areas, but we have worked really, really hard in both our city and our county on our development codes to encourage greater density for affordable housing. And so we don't want to end up with a development code that encourages more units and a financing program that caps it, because then we're going to be, wasting the opportunity. And so I'd really encourage you to think about differentiating that somehow and allowing urban communities to have a larger number of units.
Allie Stein from Forward Housing. When it comes to underwriting, I would urge the authority to allow income from operations for renovations as a project source. It's a easy source to tap into. It could be worth millions of dollars on bigger projects, and it would reduce the ask of other sources and resources from SC Housing.
Thank you. So I want to go back to Randy's comment about prelim applications for the bond program. That's a new topic for me. Kind of want to take a poll around the room. What do you guys think about that? I know it's very popular with our 9% programs. How would that be for our tax exempt bonds? We'd have to start even earlier because we're backed into dates that we can present to the bond deals to the SFAA. So just want to know how that you guys felt about that. Okay. All right. No comments on that. We have one supporter, two.
If we're going to do a preliminary application for the bond round, when we get the preliminary scores out, we need to have enough information to be able to score the deals. An address would be helpful, depending on what the scoring criteria is going to be. Maybe a preliminary score of, if it's based off of financials, however that looks, maybe you have to give some sort of indication on what their financials is going to be. If it's based on distance of services, maybe only a couple of them in the preliminary application, but it doesn't help when we get a preliminary application that just says who the developer is and what the size of the units are. We need more information from that for it to truly be helpful.
I agree with you. It was a lot of information on that spreadsheet, and you kind of had to put it on 400 to even see it on your screen. So I do agree with you on that comment. So we'll look forward to giving you some more information. All right, we're right at an hour, so we can take a quick break, a quick 10-minute break, and we'll come back in about 10 minutes. And if you need to step out, use the restroom or mingle, maybe we'll have some more topic suggestions when we come back. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Thank you. Well, I appreciate the great conversation we've had so far. Want to encourage you, now is your opportunity. You have most of the development team here. to listen to your comments. I will, of course, go back and re-listen to this video and take my notes there. We'd like for you to submit your comments written by July 2nd, so we can start working on that draft, so we can have it out by July 11th. So now is the opportunity to tell our agency what you would like to see changed. So please take this opportunity. One thing before we, there is a little bit of hearing issue when the air conditioning's on. So if you make sure you speak right up into the microphone so that it's good and loud. I think we've got it at a good volume, but sometimes if you might need to just speak right close to the microphone so that everyone can hear. Go ahead, Field.
One clarification in the QAP that I think needs to be made, you guys posted a bulletin about it on this last round, but requiring the geotech at the full application, with some of these deals, trying to go after leveraging points, it seems like it's almost kind of against the spirit of the scoring criteria. If you go for home dollars or any type of HUD funding or anything like that, until the NEPA review is completed, we can't, it's a choice limiting action to go out and do a geotech. We can't touch the property. If that stays in there for the full application, then there's funds and resources that us as developers won't be able to go after. So if we don't require geotech at the full application, that would be extremely nice.
Thank you for saying that. So we probably will move that back like we did this year. It'll probably be taken out of the QAP. We didn't realize that till it was brought to our attention, and we do appreciate that. Thank you. Any other topics we'd like to discuss about the QAP? Any appendix. It could be the tax credit manual. It could be the mandatory design criteria. Any topics?
I just wanted to make a couple clarifications too. So going back to the number of units per deal, I also, to me, since this is, about state policy, I really want to emphasize the need to have these programs coordinate. So you got SRDP, you got the tax exempt bond, and you got the 9%. So when we think about the number of units, it would be great that those kind of correspond. So smaller deals go one place, medium-sized deal goes another, larger deal goes, to the other program. And I know there's limits on that, but I would just encourage us to think about that. I think we were talking about the set-asides and the grouping, but I want to be very clear in my comment that I'd like to see Greenville be eligible for more than 2 deals per year. Okay. I just want to make that abundantly clear, and how we do that, I'm open to, but we need resources allocated based on where people live and where the demand is and where the needs are. I'm not taking anything away from smaller communities, and I know they have needs, but treating every county the same, in my opinion, is just not the right policy. Also want to talk about credit per, we've talked about credit per deal, but credit per developer. I'd like some consideration, and I would encourage you to think about if we're partnering, because we're a nonprofit, and so if we're partnering with other developers and it's a 60-40 kind of deal, I think the credits should be calculated accordingly. But right now, it's not done that way. And so if we're in a deal, it doesn't matter if we're 20%, whatever that credit allocation is, we can't do other deals because we'd be knocked out and disqualified. And I'd love to see that addressed.
Okay. I think I follow you on that. I may follow back up with a
Thank
question
you.
on that. Okay.
Tim, I have a question first. So on the applications that'll come for the 4%, will that follow the 2024 QAP or the 2025 or?
It'll be the 2024 because we won't have the 2025 signed and backed by the governor before the applications are received. So the round that we would have in October would follow the 2024 QAP.
Okay. And then I want to support Randy, not just because I'm sitting next to him, but I do think the pre-application, and whether it's a full pre-app, but some sort of preview is really important. So
a pre-app for site scoring, is that what we're looking for? Like kind of like the 9%?
I'm thinking on the 4%, whatever the scoring matrix is, if we can do something that helps us as developers really understand like how we're, if we're hitting the right metrics is what we're looking for. Cause I think I'll speak for myself. It was, and I know it was the first time, you know, and there was just a lot of different buckets that you're trying to hit in terms of resources per unit and tenant and heated square foot. And it just got very complex trying to follow that through.
Sure.
And I think one of the things for scoring too is a readiness to proceed. You know, how quickly can a deal really close? You know, because I don't want us to get to a point where we're really working on creating a really pretty presentation, but in practicality, you can't close it in time, or you don't have approvals ready, or, you know, so what that looks like, but when can a developer really close? And maybe that's a question as part of it. Like, could they close this within 6 months or 9 months or 12 months? And I know that's barring interest rate craziness and material pricing, but how close is the deal to really closing? So.
It's a good idea. So back to the question of the prelim app for the tax exempt bond. So we allow about 3 months in between for the 9% for the prelim application to the full application. Would that timeline need to be the same for the bond process, or would you need more time or less time if you did, if we did a pre-app for the bond process?
I think that comes down to
Gonna
what
have to get a little bit closer in there. That's okay.
I think that comes down to the scoring and what criteria are shown on the pre-apps, because if it's financial criteria, we would have no idea what our financial underwriting is 3 months out. That'd be too far, and especially if it goes into pre-apps and what making developers make decisions of if they're gonna put in an application or withdraw an application. We just don't have enough information that far out. If it's going to come down to more location scoring criteria, I think 3 months, 2 months, something like that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
I may get some pushback for saying this, but I disagree with, I appreciate Brian's comment about getting more deals per county. In a perfect world, that would be awesome to let Greenville, Columbia, Charleston get more deals because they have a higher need. But the unfortunate circumstance that we're in is we're playing for a limited pool of funds. So in the A category, it needs to be, people can, each county can get a certain number of deals awarded. If we give Greenville or Charleston 3 or 4 awards, and they're larger deals because that's what that market needs, then they're going to absorb all the credits and no one else is going to get funded. So I understand where that's coming from, but that's kind of a hard thing to implement and still allow affordable housing to get built across the state.
Thank you.
Tim, I'll back that up, especially when we talk about the rehab side and, we focus so much in the rural development portion of it. When we're talking about preservation, if we go ahead and give all those credits away, then what am I supposed to do with properties that need to be addressed? Like, you just look at Greenville and say, okay, well, you have Spartanburg County right beside it. You've got Pickens County. Those people still come into Greenville to work, but now they have nowhere to live. So what do we do? Now they have to move in there, and now it's a higher rate. So I mean, yes, it would be great, but we're not Georgia. We don't have the same amount of funds available. So I mean, that's when we start looking at these larger states and how many more credits are available, it's just very different from how small we are. And the way that we do have so many, and we don't even have so many counties in comparison to like Georgia, but we are a rural community. So
thank you.
Well, and echoing one of Kevin's comments earlier, if we want to, look at maybe giving counties more awards in the future, we really need to. We have the great resource of the state tax credit. So maybe reducing the basis boost in some areas and allowing a higher state credit ask. Maybe that's how we spread the federal credits out more across different counties. I think there's a way to get more deals funded in the state, but we need to seriously look at that and make sure, one county is not going to get way more awards than other parts of the state. But reducing the basis boost in certain areas would certainly help by utilizing the state credit.
We've talked about reducing the basis boost unless it's in a QCT or DDA.
Yeah, I just want to follow up and say, I'm not saying, strip the thing off and, funnel everything to one place. but I do think, 3 versus 2, we have other programs. And all these resources need to work together. So we have a 9% program, 4% bond, we have the state credit, we have the state housing trust fund. I mean, we have to start allocating these resources to meet the demand. And to answer your question, I'd like those people to live in Greenville. But I can't right now. So thank you for your comment. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thanks.
I'll agree with the comment about utilizing the state tax credit more. I think if you can, even if you're going to lower the unit count, lower the per deal limit, that could get you to be able to utilize the state tax credit as well. And kind of piggybacking on what Brian just said, have y'all had any discussions about doing 9-4 twin deals or being able to combine 9% and 4% deals to be able to do larger deals and be able to utilize the excess basis?
So we have had some agency talk about it. It has not gotten far. We have talked with Virginia about the program that they have, but that's about the extent of our conversation, is just getting some insight for them on how their program works.
All right, keep talking.
Thank you.
Good example. Good example.
Going back to your question about the time between tier 1, tier 2 in a bond program, I think that there's a short time frame on bonds, and that concerns me a little bit. So I think you really need to look at what's required at tier 1, minimal baseline, and then think it echoes. I don't remember who said it, but talking about what you would require. I think it was Parker said it. What you would require and what information you have. Some of that takes a long time to put together. Some of it takes, a relatively shorter time to put together. But I would think a short span between tier 1 and tier 2, just to get the information out there so that developers say, hey, I know I'm not going to, fare well in this competition. I can pull out. But you haven't put that much into it yet. So I would say between tier 1 and tier 2, make that relatively short, but you got to look at what information you're asking for so that we actually have time to get it turned in. And one small point, it's important. In the design criteria, the washers and dryers, we're required to have a certain number of washers and dryers. What the washer and dryer companies are doing now, if they're not getting enough demand on those units, then they make the property pay to keep that number of washers there to supplement, whatever income stream they're expecting. So it actually takes money out of the development, which is not the direction we want to go in, I don't think.
So our QAP now says that you have to have so many hookups, but you only have to have 1 washer and 1 dryer.
Okay.
So are you wanting that to be less, just have the hookups the potential need, or?
Well, I may be mistaken on that. I thought it was
Okay.
still more than that, but I think if that's gotten changed.
I think we changed that last year.
Okay.
To where you just have to have 1 installed unless the need arises, but depending on how many units, you have to have so many hookups available in case the need arises.
Okay.
But we can definitely relook at that. Because I am seeing a lot of property managers call in and they're sending in the information that says the leasing company is either pulling them or they're charging us 10 times what we were being charged before, and they wanted to reduce the number of units. So that is something we're seeing on a lot of properties now.
You're right, Kim. That is what you changed it to from 22 to 23, but it didn't go in until 24. So it's saying
Okay.
you have to have so many, let's say 3 up to 50, 3 per, but 1 available with the ability to put them in there. Just wanted to hit, earlier we talked about renewable energy. And that's great on new construction. But I've also heard talking about wild cards as insurance. So when you talk about rehabs, we're seeing a lot of issues as developer, owner, manager, how that impacts our management fees and those having to go up because of insurance increases for adding loads to roofs, whether it's talking about solar. Do I have enough room for it? Are my municipalities, utility companies actually going to credit us? Are they going to let that come in? As these are individual units that pay their own power bill, how do I get those tax credits back to me? How does that actually work? Because the money goes back to the person paying it. It's really kind of muddy on that with how it's going to function. And then when you look at maintenance and upkeep, it's what does that cost look like over that 20 years? Is it really going to be 20 years? Do they come off in 10? Now, what do I do with warranties on roofs where I have to have a set warranty? Is my shingle manufacturer going to say, yes, this is good? Oh, no, we didn't come out and verify it. So now I don't have a 20-year warranty on that shingle, or not 20, but 40 years on there. So it's a lot of moving parts to go and put that in. And it, we want to get there. But, when we have some of these issues, we can't take these solar panels to landfills. So now I come in, I want to rehab it. What do I do with that in 15, 20 years when I say, well, where am I going to put this? Because now we can't put it in the landfill because now it's more detrimental to the earth by putting it back in there. The batteries, what are we doing with those? We have leaks that we could have coming off of those. So we're in a really volatile time on how that's going to be implemented. I know the tax credit sits out there, and I really don't know a good answer on that, but I wouldn't like to see it as a mandatory. Maybe that's just a bonus.
Thank you. And it sounds like we as an agency probably need to do a little bit of research on that before we put that in the QAP as well. All right, any other topics that you guys would like to discuss? Again, it could be about any of the appendix, the QAP, mandatory design criteria, tax credit manual.
This is kind of in the weeds, and it's related to the mandatory rehab criteria, but requiring ceiling fans in all living rooms and bedrooms. I think if you're installing central AC, then that's probably not necessary and just an added cost. The unit shutoff valves, I think that could be very cost prohibitive on certain rehabs. And if you're adding shutoffs per stack, then you achieve pretty close to that. And so that's another suggestion to delete unit shutoff valve requirements. And then requiring a structural report within 6 months. On renovations, the structure is not going to really change much within 6 months. Even if that's 1 year, I think that would, just reduce a cost that developers have to incur before submitting an application.
Thank you. Those are some good suggestions.
On the 9% scoring on other types of tax credits, I would suggest a tiered criteria similar to the leveraging, as opposed to an all or nothing 5 points where there can be such a minimal benefit from the tax credit, but you still get 5 points. It should be somewhat correlated that you need to get more benefit to get more points.
Another good suggestion.
Shanti, water construction. The design manual appendix B. So we have done multiple projects based on the ADA requirements, and it calls for 2 trainings mandatory for ADA.
I'm gonna ask you to speak in the microphone.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
They're calling for 2 mandatory inspections, trainings, ADA trainings. So we have done so many trainings already, and the same subs from time to time. Everyone is asking all this again. We have to do it again. We have to do it again. Maybe is it possible if we already have done a project following these standards, maybe instead of 2 mandatory trainings, maybe just 1, and then we can go over that in the field. If there are any changes and updates to the procedure, whatever, then we can update it then. I'm just maybe a little bit too much if we've done it so many times before with the same people.
Sure.
Thought.
That's something we can look into. Sure.
I'll agree with that statement too, especially on rehab where you have such a short timeline. On new construction, you've got different facets that would come through and how long that takes to break ground to get up and then trim out. So on rehab, we're looking at what? 90 days start to finish. We're closing out saying, all right, we're done. And how quick some of these are. And especially on the rural development side with 24 units, we're done with most of it in a week, where we have most of the trades come in. Our concrete guys, they better know, or else they're going to have to rip it out and it's going to cost them money. But, to have the two, what we found is we have one at initial. So during our pre-con, before we go out, we're going to sit and talk about it on common things that we find. They come out, do an inspection, and, you know, I think one before you go out would be good. I think it really puts the onus on the general contractor to make sure that they are versed in it to hold to it. You know, all of that is just trying to line that up on the rehab side is very difficult to hit inside of those windows and get it done. So I think the one initial training makes the most sense, but you know, again, that's
something we can definitely look into.
Let's see, I forgot, so I'm sure I'll remember it.
We'll try to remember so you can. Any other comments? There we go.
Yep. Talking about design criteria of submitting plans. I know we're talking about, you know, structural. When we're doing the plan review for the full plan review 10 months after allocation, I know we've gotten a lot of pushback on wanting engineers to mark up our wiring or plumbing and all of these different things and how it's called out. And I know I've talked with the consultant that reviews the plans, and what we believe is calling out is it's a replacing kind. So, you know, when we go to new construction, I'm going to have a brand new wiring diagram. It's not hard to follow. But, you know, if I get them to draw something on something that was built in 1978 or 1985, I may not have such an intricate set of plans to go back. So really, if I draw something, design it, submit it to the county, we open a wall and it's different. Now I'm outside of my compliance and what my plans show. So really what we're doing is we're saying it's an existing structure. You know, we call out, we show the existing plans, but having to have a wiring diagram, plumbing diagram, HVAC, mechanical, I think even the reviewers had a difficult time trying to explain what they're looking for or what it would be. I mean, the level that what we're doing, it's not a full gut rehab at that point, then yes, I would say you would need to put that in there just to make sure. But on just a standard replacing kind rehab, I think that may be a little bit more in taking up time on the review of the plans to get it back out for us to start as quick as possible.
Thank you. I'll definitely look into that.
Wanted to echo what Robinson said a little bit earlier about the credit cap per deal. We think it's too high as well. And instead of capping the amount of units that you can build, we'd rather just see that credit cap decreased and then let the amount of units we build be dictated by, you know, our ability to identify soft funds. I think specifically, if you look at South Carolina in comparison to its surrounding states, its credit cap per deal is almost double what other states around it are. So.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Going back on ADA, and we can get back into its accessibility / FHA. We're going back into a lot of these units that were built pre-1991. The way that the 2024 is laid out, let's just say bathrooms. Bathrooms are always an ADA issue, but when we get into a standard unit or, you know, type B, that would just be a standard unit. We get into these bathrooms that aren't designed per FHA standard. We don't have the space. And we never want to take away from what the resident is used to having. In the 2023, 2024, when we talk about putting in new vanities in a bathroom, we're saying it has to be 36 inches. Well, I can't meet that and have the space with the 18-inch off. And, you know, rehab is so different from the new construction world where it's, if you replace it, it has to be this. And I know we've talked about walking and getting out there once it's awarded and writing anything up for a waiver process to look at it and address it. But, you know, on that one, if it's possible, then yes, we'd love to give them more storage space, but the only way that I could get around it would be to remove it to meet my clearance. And now I'm taking away storage space in limited spaces where, you know, they were designed to be much smaller. So some of those items, I don't know how to truly address it better. I know that we went from 19 to 20, 20 was crazy. Then 21 came out and we still had new and rehab construction. Now we've gone back through and said it does not apply. And I think that works pretty well. It's just recognizing that we can't retrofit all of these to meet the new standards to where any new developer should not have an issue because they're going to be held to those new standards no matter what. They're going in and it should be done that way anyway by municipality. You know, the state code is going to make them do that. So just how do we make that work? You know, we're trying to do things. We're trying to make sure we're running into FHA issues when we go onto these properties that were built in like 1996 or 2005. You would think, oh, they understood. Well, they don't. None of my concrete works because they thought it was a variance to where, oh, well, it's interpretation. You know, 5.1% will be okay. Where we come out now and they're saying, no, rip it out. So, I mean, it is just changed for how we have to approach it in a lot of these different things.
Thank you. I need to do some research around the ADA requirements for the rehab and we'll look at making some updates to our design criteria for those.
So maybe there should be separate criterias like for rehab and new construction, and maybe there you can put the flexibility items that you're trying to approach here.
That is a good idea to separate those two. All right, any other comments? All right, well, this is completely off topic, but it is roundtable related. Thinking about spaces for next year, Columbia, a good spot. Any other areas that would be a better location? So we're centrally located here. It's easy for me. I don't have to get up the crack of dawn and drive somewhere. So I'm thankful for being in Columbia, but just throwing that out to the room. Trying to let them time set up for lunch. We can break for lunch, but you know, just throwing that out there. Add another speaker. I got you. That'd be a good idea. We might do that for next year. Thank you. All right. What about the time of year? And we've been kicking it off around the middle of the year. Would it be better to kick it off closer to, you know, maybe the spring? So that we potentially can get the QAP to the governor's office earlier and maybe have it signed a little earlier. Any thoughts on that? Got a couple thumbs up on that. All right. Okay, well, they're still setting up for lunch, so I'll have to think of something else to say unless someone else has anything they'd like to say. Okay.
I don't know when is a great time, right? Because we just got done putting in full apps and then in the spring you're dealing with pre-app. So especially for 9%, but then bonds are going to be later. So it just depends on what you're doing. So half a dozen of one, 6 other, but centrally located will be great for us because we're around in Columbia. But you're talking about going with tax exempt bonds and pre-app. On the new construction side of that, you know, you're dealing with one property and you're saying what goes into it, how much time do you need? When you're doing a 4% tax exempt bond on rehabs and we're combining multiple sites, all the reporting that's needed up front that you may be requiring to look at pre-app takes a lot of time, and it is a true investment on all of those reports times one. Okay, we can do it. Times 20 and getting all that coordinated and submitted takes a little bit more time for us to really evaluate. And the commitment that we put in on a 4% rehab portfolio is a lot of undertaking, especially with all the third parties that we have to get in and review and make sure that it meets what you're looking for. So I don't know what the pre-app looks like and what all you require, but it could be a large sum. We're talking, you know, $500,000, $1 million on third-party reports that we're committed to just to get that out there. So.
Okay, thank you.
I've been reflecting on the points and the 9% and geography and affordability and population. And I just want to clarify a couple comments. And really, if we look at the list of tax credit awards, both state credit and the tax exempt bond and the 9%, and we reflect on, you know, population, like in other words, the policy should be supporting what's good for the people of South Carolina and not what's easy or best for developers. And I just want to really think about how we score points, how we allocate resources. I think, frankly, you could increase the points when you're talking about deep affordability targeting. And if you're going to, integrate supportive housing in those deals, that's really awesome. I also think if you have the relationships you need with your housing authority and you can get project-based vouchers awarded to a project before the application, you ought to get more points. I would really encourage you to increase the points on that. And then, I think whether it's 2 deals per county, you break it up into group A, B, or whatever, and, some get 3, some get 2. I don't think that is going to negatively impact smaller communities. But we need help in our community because people are moving to other counties because they have to. And I just think we have to address that somehow. So whether that's number of units per county, like, I was thinking, what if we had, 350s instead of 200s? You know what I mean? Like, I think there's ways to do that I haven't fully thought of, but I'd like to continue to think about it.
Thank you.
Jumping back to the roundtable timing, I do like it shortly after the 9% applications go in. I think it has 2 advantages. One, the 9% application is fresh on all of our minds, knowing what went well, what didn't go well, that we can make suggestions for the future round, and we're not trying to make suggestions before we even fully experience the round. The other advantage is I think developer participation could be higher after the fact compared to before. If there's something that could be a strategic advantage, developers might not want to bring that up in a roundtable if applications haven't gone in yet.
Good way to think about it. Thank you.
I'm going to echo what Chris said about the pre-apps for the bond rounds. If you're doing an RD portfolio, having all those third parties ready to go at pre-app is a huge undertaking and a big expense. Yeah, especially if it's competitive. And with the timeline between pre-app and full app, I don't think it needs to be short. I think the pre-app is just to kind of gauge where you are, and maybe you see another site you're competing with, and you're like, you know what, I know I can't make up those site points, I can drop out. That's your time to put your deal together of, okay, I know how to do this. I know where I can go get my points. That's my time to go, hey, I can catch up. Maybe I can go find some soft money or something. That's your time to catch up and get competitive, or you can make a decision. I think if you lay all your cards on the table at pre-app, you might lose out some good deals, and then or lots of people are going to spend a lot of money to find out that maybe they shouldn't have. So I think a little more time would actually be better.
Thank you.
I definitely agree with that. I think the period between the pre-application and full application should be, a time where you to figure out if you want to do your deal or not. And specifically the bond timeline of when applications are due, when awards are made, and the next round starts. I'm trying to be realistic and understand you guys aren't superheroes, but the last bond round awards were made, 2 weeks ago, and the next bond round is starting early October. So that really only leaves us 3.5 months if we didn't get awarded to pivot and try to figure out how to make our deal more competitive. And, there's a saying that bond deals take years, not months, to put together. And so it's just not a lot of time for us to pivot, and kind of might result in some less than favorable deals. And so any type of time we could buy between award and the next round starting, I think would be pretty beneficial as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, lunch is ready. So there are several options to choose from, and I think they're broken down by option. So if you will get your lunch, please can have great conversation with your group. So we'll have some more topics after lunch. And I hope you enjoy your lunch, and we'll maybe come back in 30, 45 minutes. Thank you.
And I don't control who is in that unit. I can't do that based on fair housing. If it's available, then someone is in a waiting list, they get to go into it. So I come in, that unit's designated, we revamp it. It's set up for accessibility. We meet every requirement that we have to, but we put a roll-in shower in a family unit and nobody is in a wheelchair. And now I have one bathroom. I can't give my child a shower. I can't give them a bath. It's something that we have accessible tubs that can be used. Right now, as it stands, I have to have a roll-in shower in 100% of my type A units on the QAP.
Okay.
So on families, maybe it's a percentage. Or if, I mean, the only other thing would be a reasonable accommodation to say that, no, we need a tub. So I just don't, you know, if we do an evaluation and say, listen, it's not the $3,000, $4,000 worth of difference. That really doesn't impact us one way or the other to do it, but it's really quality of life for the family that's in there. On the senior property, I'd completely agree with it because now I don't have to worry about any kind of fall going in and out and traversing it. But day-to-day life in a unit where, unlike new construction, I don't get to hold or have a set aside for new residents coming in that would qualify for it. If they were in there, they get to go back in there and it's first available from that point on. So it's a big impact to a way of life by just having that mandated in a family property. It just, I know it's a random statement, but it does impact. I mean,
It makes some difference.
we turned over a unit and the first thing we had to say to a resident was, are you okay with a roll-in shower? Because they don't have a tub anymore.
Thank you for that. That is something we'll look into. Our rehab requirements for our design criteria is something we definitely need to revisit. So we'll definitely be looking into that.
For family developments, the requirement to have 25% of units at 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, I would recommend a range, say 15 to 30% or 20 to 30%, just to allow some flexibility with units stacking. It's hard to get to exactly 25, give or take a unit, and can create some weird configurations.
Thank you. That's very good feedback. Thank you. All right, any other comments? Well, I am not going to torture you. I promised last year an ice cream bar and I failed on that miserably. So I'm not gonna promise that this year. I don't know that I'd get that approved if I did promise it. But we can work towards that. So something was brought up to my attention at lunch, as far as venues for next year. Maybe visit a development and have it hosted on maybe a recently completed development. I don't know if you guys would have the space. Some developments may, some developments may not, but thoughts on that or suggestions? We'll leave that out there. Maybe get some more suggestions when we decide to schedule for next year. Anything, I just want to go back over the topics. And again, you don't have to say it today. You can submit it in the comments and we'll go through those. I do, again, I know I've said this several times, I do go through this video and I listen and take comments. I'm able to pause it and, make sure I get good notes. We all compare notes in our agency staff. So your written comments are very well appreciated as too, really very well appreciated as well. But if you see something that's working well in another state, whether it be a point criteria or even, has to do with a process that we could improve on, I'd love to hear that feedback. We'd like to get some feedback. We talked a little bit about the set-asides today. I think we've got some good feedback on that. We've talked a lot about our public housing authority set-aside, and I think that has been very beneficial to me. Talked about taxes and bond ranking. So heard from you guys on that. I'm going to try to put some things together. But again, some things in writing might work and some things that, you've seen in other states that work well. If you'd like to share those with me. Rehab tiebreakers, we did go over that briefly. Got a few suggestions. Talked about cash flow per unit and expense ranges. Any other topics that you guys want to talk about or any last comments that you want to make about our program, our process? how we can improve as an agency in our tax credit and tax exempt bond program.
Kim, one last comment. If get all the comments in, let's make, some solid decisions on how to move forward. Establish a timeline and let's try to stick with that. And also try to keep the QAP. Don't change the QAP once, because it's very difficult. When we go out and find these sites, invest a lot of money, and then something changes. So that's probably the biggest ask of all.
Sure. And that's why it's important to get the comments in earlier. I know we get some political comments that can only come in later. If you're working with that official, please ask them to submit that comment in earlier. So we'll have that information earlier. The more comments we get in earlier, the smoother this process will go. I can promise you that.
Wanted to follow up on his comment about the 3 and 4 bedrooms. I think it's 25% required, but no more than 35. If we do go with the Public Housing Authority set aside, I'd like you to reconsider that, because when you do a RAD conversion, you have to do it based on the size of the families that currently reside there. And so we ended up with a project that we had to have more than 35% 3 and 4 bedrooms. And so I think it's just important to keep that in mind. Again, as part of these conversions, you've got federal regulations that dictate some of these things, and we don't want to create a set aside that is going to be contradictory to what we can do at the federal level.
I may reach back out to you and get some information about the requirements for RAD. Thank you.
This is a Joseph comment. He's in Greece right now, but he was texting me, and this one might be a little off the wall, so I'm going to give him credit for this one. For the bulletins and things that y'all put out, kind of updates to the QAP, do y'all or maybe would think about doing draft bulletins or anything like that, to where you can maybe give like 5 business days for us to comment on them before they go into effect, just to maybe hopefully keep from the whiplash of, back and forth on some of the bulletins that might be more confusing or not what people, there just seems like, any sentence you throw it to a room of developers, you're probably going to get like 3 or 4 different interpretations of each sentence.
That's a good comment. Thank you. I had not thought about that. So
You'll make his day.
Tell Joseph I said thank you. I was wondering where he was, since he was not here today. All right. Well, I'm not gonna go ahead. Yes, sir.
Ethan with Holiday Ventures. How much bond volume is going to be available in October? Has that been set?
It has not been decided. I do not have a final number off the top of my head. It will be similar to what we had this last time.
Okay.
It'll be a similar dollar amount. I do not know the exact number though.
Okay, thank you.
But we will post that when we post the timeline. All right, well. Any last comments, any last thoughts? I do appreciate your time today. I do appreciate your input, your thought process. We're all here to put affordable housing in South Carolina, and I think you guys have that best interest at heart, and I greatly appreciate the time and the investment that you guys have, and I appreciate the feedback. I will make one last plea to have all comments in by July 2nd, written comments in, so we can start working on our QAP. We can get the process going. Again, we'll post a draft, schedule a Zoom to go over the QAP, take some more comments, probably get another draft out there before we get a final and go over that. We will be hosting an application workshop prior to the tax exempt bond applications coming in, so look out for information on that. And I think that's all the reminders that I have. Make sure you email the tax credit questions mailbox with your comments. And I think that's it. So again, I appreciate your time. If no one else has any other comments, I hope you have a good afternoon and a safe trip home. It hurts so bad.